Hey everyone, I recently sat down to record this interview episode with a seasoned hyperautomation professional who has been there and done that. This particular episode focuses exclusively on enterprise content management and intelligent capture solutions, which are part and parcel to the hyperautomation journey. And when it comes to the successful adoption of content and capture, look no further than Jim and his team at enChoice. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did with Jim Picardi, Executive Vice President at enChoice, an award-winning content and capture services provider. Enjoy. Welcome back to Bots and Thoughts, the hyperautomation podcast, sponsored by Salient Process. I'm your host, Jimmy Hewitt, aka Mr. Automation. Welcome, Mr. Jim Picardi, the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at enChoice. For those, well, first off, thanks so much for joining us today, Jim.
Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate you inviting me to join. Happy to be here.
Of course. Looking forward to the discussion. We're going to jump right in. We've been working with each other for a couple of years now, so we know each other and kind of what we do. But for those who haven't met you and don't know enChoice, please let us know. Tell us a bit about enChoice, yourself, and what you guys do.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's always interesting explaining what you do as a company, right? But in short, we help companies design, implement, and support their digital transformation initiatives. And we do that by leveraging our experience in, a number of different technologies, right? Capture, enterprise content management, and business process management. We've been doing that now for almost 30 years. We're just about to start our 30th year doing that. So it's been a long time. Yeah. So the company
What a milestone.
Yeah. The company got started as a FileNet partner way back in the early 90s because we found customers were really looking for a business partner to help them implement, a total solution of what was revolutionary, technology back then at that time, the digitization of documents and implementation of electronic workflow processes. And today, enChoice has over about 100 employees, and we remain 100% focused on the core business of capture, content, and process management. As for me, I've been in the content management business for, well over 30 years. I actually got started with FileNet way back when as one of their first salespeople here in the Boston area where I live, and then held roles in FileNet and IBM sales leadership after IBM acquired FileNet, worked for Kofax as one of their regional vice presidents for a number of years, and then came to enChoice just about 9 years ago, now as the EVP of sales and marketing. So a lot of folks at enChoice are like myself, who have made a career out of the content management business. So I think the thing that separates us as a company is the experience level and quality of our people. Most of our folks who are working with customers and delivering solutions have an average tenure that exceeds 15 years, which is, a lot of experience for our industry. So
that's expertise right there.
Yeah.
That's a great intro to enChoice and yourself. Thank you, Jim. We talk about hyperautomation on this podcast, which is a fairly broad term. It covers 7 distinct capabilities. It sounds like you and enChoice have carved out a space within the broad term of hyperautomation. For the listeners, how would you describe that space, and how it fits into the broader hyperautomation term?
Yeah, I think, 7 different technologies. I've seen it defined a number of different ways, but there are a lot of different technologies that are actually going hand in hand, right? If you think about hyperautomation, it's involved in the capture of information or the ingestion of information from documents. And people are talking about hyperautomation, but that technology has been around. It's gotten a lot better, but the ability to ingest content and metadata is a tough thing to do, right? It's still largely a manual effort that's now being soothed by the promise of hyperautomation. I mean, we have a lot of companies out there that are, while they may have implemented systems a long time ago, are still doing a lot of that process manually. So hyperautomation allows them to streamline the front end of the process by ingesting information, automatically, if you will, through artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities that are really important because it really takes a lot of manual effort out of the process. So, and those technologies work very well today. I mean, I've been in the business a long time, and there was at one time where they weren't that strong. They're very strong now, and there's a lot of standard platforms that do that very well. And the interesting thing is most customers are not taking advantage of that yet. So it is a significant growth area for our industry. Much like a lot of 100%. Companies were using content, but they weren't using one of the most important pieces of the technology, which is the whole process automation piece to streamline that process. It's almost the same thing for the front end of the process in terms of ingesting documents.
Great. You talk about customers not fully taking advantage of the benefits and gains of these capture and content management technologies. Let me ask, you see a lot of clients, your team sees a lot of companies going through it. I'm sure it's a journey, a spectrum, right? But how would you describe the most common current state, if you will? What content or capture posture would you say is kind of a pretty common starting place for your customers?
We usually find them in two states, probably like you folks do. I mean, either they've implemented some kind of first generation system that, has missed the mark and are trying to take that to the next level, or they have never implemented any kind of solution, although it's so tough to believe here in 2022 that, major organizations haven't done that. There's still plenty of companies that have not implemented any kind of content or process management. So we are trying to take them from wherever they are today to the next level. If it's a first generation system that they're looking at, then it's, getting their arms around what are their processes today, and then paint the picture and the vision of what can happen with digital transformation using a variety of the technologies that we've been talking about here. So we're kind of getting into use cases here, talking about where customers are at on their content management journey. First generation solutions reminds me of maybe some repositories, some common repositories out there. Spaces, sprawl is happening, a lack of organization, standardization, taxonomy even, that these first generation content management platforms aren't ready to deliver easily to their providers or their customers, their users rather. But what are some use cases as they move from, say, first generation content management into now best of breed? What are some common use cases, or perhaps your favorite one? So I think it's probably fair to say that, a lot of companies are not getting the most out of the capabilities that are possible. So that's very common, right? Two common examples are where companies are using a document capture solution, but they're using no artificial intelligence or machine learning, meaning that they have documents come into the company and those documents still have to be separated and indexed manually, where they could be taking advantage of artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the technologies that are available to actually classify or recognize what kind of document that is and then extract that information off. So if you think about the manpower required to do that when you are receiving what could be hundreds of thousands of documents a day that people have to sort documents and index those, and you use technology instead to do that, it's transforming. That's one area. The other area that you guys are very familiar with is they may be using a content management system, but they haven't implemented process management to capture content at the front end of the process and streamline that process from beginning to end. So generically, that's what it is. Yeah. The use cases range all over the place, right? I mean, if you look
as diverse as business.
Exactly. I mean, really. The common use cases across all industry, kind of a horizontal application is, for example, accounts payable or invoice processing. But then when you look at specific industries, I mean, it's very common in insurance, for example, to see claims processing. Very common in banking to see mortgage underwriting and mortgage servicing, and government case management of some sort. So, there are many different, I've seen literally hundreds of use cases.
Do any of those stick out? I mean, what our audience would love to hear is a detailed dissection, if you could, of a use case. Where were they at when they came to you? How did they describe their posture or their current state? What was implemented, and what is life like today?
So actually, one of my favorite use cases, one of the first ones I was ever involved with many, many years ago. Oh. And the reason why it's my favorite use case is the size of the company. I mean, typically, I think people think of, implementing this technology in these large multinational companies. And that is true, right? But the use case I'm thinking of is we were involved when I was at FileNet many, many years ago with a company that specialized in student loan servicing. So if you picture what that business is like, it is literally the student loan is the product, if you will. They were inundated with paper and process. That company, what makes it an interesting story is that company's revenues were $16 million with an M, not a B. A $16 million company with only 300 employees spent well over $1 million in implementing a content management and process management system and had a very, very strong ROI. So think about the percentage of revenue that they spent on that system, and it transformed their business because it completely changed their processes to all electronic processes, gave them all access immediately to files, and allowed them to grow their business without increasing the number of employees in the company. So it was transforming. We actually ended up making the cover of their annual report. So it's a great story, and it basically says, look, irrespective of how big you are and what your business is, if you have the right leadership at the company and you have the right focus on what the business problem is, you can transform your business irrespective of how big the company is.
Yeah, that is so cool. We've got clients that are Fortune 6 and 6 people companies. And everything in between. Automation, hyper automation really does not discriminate by size of company. If there's waste in your organization, there's gain. And that's one trend I've noticed in this space over the last, coming up on a decade in this space, is how approachable these solutions are from a price point and a time to value perspective, as one trend, right? The intent has kind of stayed relatively the same since digital transformation, enterprise content management got kind of kicked off in the mid to late 80s. But the technology is really getting a lot easier to use and much more approachable for customers of all sizes. What other trends have you noticed? You've got a lot of experience in this space. Sorry, I'll tee you up here. What trends have you noticed in your tenure?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. This business, in some ways, has stayed the same, as you just mentioned, and it's also changed. I mean, the ways it stayed the same is you use the word intent. I mean, the intent of these systems has always been the same. How do I increase productivity? How do I provide better customer service? How do I deal with all the regulation and governance inundation that I have to do for my organization? And ultimately, when you mix all those things together, how do I do that while driving down costs, right? The things that have changed, those have always been constant. The thing that has changed is the kind of the means to get there, if you will. The technology has improved with things like moving to the cloud, software as a service, hosted solutions. So the complexities of implementing and supporting these solutions, there are a lot more alternatives for customers than there used to be when on-prem was the only alternative, right? So there's a lot more options for customers in terms of outsourcing that entire operation as software as a service or a hosted solution of some kind. We mentioned a couple of technologies that have transformed the way these implementations can go down, right? The whole artificial intelligence component is making it much easier to ingest content. So, what we're trying to do is help customers by utilizing all the great new technologies that are available to them now to make the journey a lot easier than it used to be. But the objectives are very similar to what they used to be.
Yeah, that's really well said. The objectives are the same: paperless office, compliance, better customer experience, remove waste, move things along faster. But the technology has gotten a lot better, a lot of innovation in the space. You guys do a great job of not only making it easy for your customers to host software, you'll host it for them, manage it for them. But you've also developed some accelerators on top of these solutions that are allowing your customers to experience faster time to value.
Exactly.
Right? We've got great software, but you build even better software, plugins, add-ons, accelerators to make it even easier to use.
Yep.
Want to talk about some of your favorite accelerators that are helping your customers take advantage of these solutions?
Yeah, I mean, in that,
what's one that comes to mind?
Our whole tagline is around, acceleration, right? Time to value. So, we've been doing that historically in a number of different areas and in the tools we've developed. The most recent one is we acquired the assets and the brand of an organization that was been floating around our industry for a while called Magic Lamp Software. And, they've spent...
That's right. Congrats again on that, Jim.
We did that in March, and they spent, many years working on accelerators for the whole intelligent capture space, things that allow them to more easily ingest documents and content off those documents and manage that whole process. So, when we work with customers, they see the tools that we've developed, and they're going to have to develop these tools if they want to be, at their most productive, best self, if you will, right? And so we've developed those already. So we cut the time it takes for them to get in production and start taking advantage of that, system that goes in too. Time to value is an incredibly important part of and component of any of the systems that go in because they're complex systems. They're very complex. So, yeah, acceleration is important.
100%. Yeah, you guys do a great job with that. Let me ask you a question before we jump into some rapid fire ones here, Jim. Think about the future, right? We've come a long way in this space, but where's the market headed? And what is one thing that you're most looking forward to in the future?
Where the market's headed, I think we've seen glimpses of that already. I mean, everybody's trying to drive down the cost of these systems. I'm seeing with the aging workforce, I'm seeing a lot of companies who have lost their support structure for some of these legacy systems, right? So there's a move to how do I how do I offload the support aspects, the administrative aspects? How do I not have to do all this stuff myself in a way that's still going to be cost effective for our organization, right? So driving down those costs while at the same time depending on third parties to do that. So you see a lot of move to the cloud. You see a lot of software as a service, a lot of hosted solutions. I mean, you've seen, I mean, look what kind of things the pandemic has caused in certain industries. They've forced industries to take huge leaps forward in a matter of months just to survive. I mean, look at the healthcare industry. Telehealth, for example, I mean, was forced overnight because it had to be. Or look at how quickly IT organizations had to react to their, the whole enablement of their employees with the work from home initiative. It forced, what would have maybe been taken 10 years, it forced it in a matter of months. And the same thing is happening in our industry, right? There are companies that are being forced through competitive factors to implement this kind of technology, or get help in supporting what they've already got in place. So it's a survival thing, and that's important.
Yeah, feels like a for sure. It feels like a bit of picking up the pieces in a new, more streamlined, optimized way.
Yep.
This is what we're experiencing coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. Okay, Jim, couple of rapid fire questions for you. I like to ask if you could design a billboard for our audience listening to the podcast. Maybe they are considering upgrading that first generation capture or content management system. They're somewhere on the earlier part of their hyperautomation journey. If you could design a billboard that they see every time they drive out of their driveway, what would that billboard say?
That one's easy because we deal with it every day. Executive sponsorship and return on investment. You need an executive.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at the most successful projects, you have an executive team that is completely bought into transforming their business. And typically, that is a line of business executive. Or projects,
like operations,
or projects go nowhere.
Compliance,
and hand in hand in that sponsorship is justifying the business case, which usually those execs will require, unless there's some non-ROI strategic initiative, which is atypical. It's more typical that you are competing for dollars and competing against other projects for who's got the best return on investment, right? So, I mean, to me, when I look at why these projects are successful or why they happen versus not happen, you can take the technology and throw it out the window. It's about the business aspects of it, relating to, do I have an executive who is driving this initiative, and do I have a good business case to do it? And if you don't have those two things, typically you're not going to have a project. So that's what my billboard would say.
Right. Executive sponsorship and ROI. That's great, Jim. Yeah, it's so true. So all the process analysts, senior business process owners, automation leaders, directors of hyperautomation out there, if you don't have a executive sponsor and a well ironed out logical business case on which your new ECM project is standing, work on it. And that's what we do, right? We help our customers build those business cases. We help align the executive sponsors if any help is needed there. So really good billboard message there, Jim. Next rapid fire question. When you think of this enterprise content management space, which includes capture and workflow, of course, what's the first word that comes to mind?
Complex. I mean, it is. I mean, if you think about how these decisions get made, they're made with committees and people who, a bunch of different constituents who all have a job to do and are looking for it from a different perspective in terms of the analysis of it. And then when you look at the implementation side, it's also complex. You're changing the way an organization has been doing business typically for what could be decades, right? And that means, this is not just about technology. This means this is all about cultural change, which is very understated and something that, organizations are forced to think about. You are, in some cases, completely changing people's roles and how they process work, or, completely chinging the complexion of the company and how they work at all, right? So it's important that you bring back best practices to those situations. And from our perspective, our job is to make sure that we set the right expectations for people, that this isn't easy. It's complex, but it's doable with the right people in place on both sides. So I think of the word complex.
Yeah. That's a good one, Jim. Thank you. Okay, a couple more. When it comes to adopting ECM or capture workflow solutions, and you may have already hinted on this or maybe not, what's the most common barrier to adoption, and how are you and your team helping your customers overcome that barrier?
I touched on part of it. You got to have somebody. There's some other key points here too. Probably. I mean, executive sponsorship. You have to have somebody who's driving this. And I've never seen a project happen when there wasn't the correct executive sponsorship. So we beat that horse. But some of the other barriers are time. So many people in the organization want to weigh in, right? So you have to have a vision of what you want. And the other thing is, where do I start? For organizations, these are large organizations with many problems, and they're, competing problems, and there's only so much money to go around, right? So, helping them find the right place to start the journey and who to get involved are some of the important factors. And as a matter of fact, you guys have a tool that lends itself well to doing that with the Automation Compass, right? You have the ability to look at the return on investment for a variety of different projects and identify the winners versus those that maybe aren't so quite as compelling, if you will, right? So
that's right. There's very limited amount of resources to go around. So it's all about quantifying, doing one or the other. That logical business case. Great. Okay. Last question for you is, please brag a little, Jim. Tell us what enChoice is up to lately. Give us, some sort of update on the company and what that means for your clients.
The company is, one of the things that's made us successful. You're not around 30 years because, you haven't been delivering quality solutions to people, right? We're very proud of the fact that, we've seen a lot of companies come and go in this industry. So
when is that?
That's next
30-year anniversary?
In 2023. We got started in 1993.
Next year.
So we're planning for that right now.
Amazing.
But, I think the important part for us is to stick to our knitting, right? So we've never really gone off course to our core business. It's one of the things that, separates us from some other companies. We wake up every day focused on 100% focused on, the digital transformation and implementing transformative solutions for our customers. And so I don't see us deviating from that path. I see us certainly strengthening that. We've made 6 acquisitions over the years. The most recent one we just talked about is, the whole magic lamp on the capture side, right? So we'll continue to do that to kind of build out the portfolio, but we're going to, we'll be sticking to our knitting as well. But I think we do a pretty good job, and I think it's really helped us to stay focused. So I would see us adding, additional pieces to the story, and, continuing to help customers with the support aspects. We do over 50% of our business in recurring revenue that's focused on the support aspects of their business too in the managed services world. So we'll continue to extend that out to help customers, manage their systems, which is often an afterthought. So I think
And how about that net promoter score?
That's really important. The net promoter score is important. We do, over 80%. We do over 80% of our business with existing customers. So, we better do a good job for our customers, or they won't be coming back to us. And
I heard your net promoter score the other day. It's a good number. You want to share?
Why don't you tell me what number you heard? I'd like to hear what your
9.4 out of 10. It doesn't get much better than that.
We always round up, right? So it's 9.5 out of 10. So that's a good.
There you go.
And we've been managing that
rounds up to 10.
Actually, tracking that since 2003. So we've been doing it a long time, and that's really important to us because the world is your oyster really if you do a good job in these projects, because there's always another one behind it that has some good ROI potential.
Yep. Well, speaking of oysters, you enjoy the rest of your summer on the Cape.
All right, Jimmy, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. Pleasure to be with you.
Of course. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks again, Jim. Okay, we'll chat with you later. Thanks for listening to another episode of Bots and Thoughts, the hyperautomation podcast, sponsored by Salient Process. Be sure to never miss an episode by hitting that subscribe button wherever you're listening to this. Get your hands on more content like this by following us on LinkedIn and YouTube down in the show notes, and say hello. We'd love to hear your thoughts, perhaps even on an upcoming episode. Stay tuned for more episodes of Bots and Thoughts, the hyperautomation podcast, brought to you by Salient Process.